All right, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If Patty gives me the thumbs up that she's all ready, two thumbs up, even better. Thank you all for attending. I'm Adam Roberts, the Executive Director of Bethesda Green. I want to welcome you all to our presentation and event for the next few hours, Entrepreneurs as Transformers. And we're going to have an exciting panel. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes by way of introduction. Patty has tasked me with 4 responsibilities. The first is to do some housekeeping. The second is to look at the agenda. The third is to talk a little bit about Bethesda Green for those of you who may not be completely familiar with our work. And the last thing is to introduce our keynote speaker. And you'll see on the slide in front of you, Entrepreneurs as Transformers, that there's a bit in the subtitle about pivoting in fragile times. And we don't yet have our keynote speaker to the best of my knowledge. So we may very well have to be slightly entrepreneurial and pivot if he's experiencing technical difficulties. But hopefully by the time I finish my few remarks, Mark Elrich, our keynote speaker, will have joined us. If not, we'll make it work. So again, I'm Adam Roberts with Bethesda Green. I want to thank you all for coming today. Taking a quick look at the housekeeping. There's not that much to tell you that you won't be familiar with. Thankfully, under normal circumstances in doing a presentation like this, I would alert you to where the restrooms and the coffee are. I would hope that everyone being where you are now in these uncertain times, you know the answer to both of those questions. So just remind you that if you want to use the chat box below to introduce yourselves, please do with any details or conversation. When we have the business panel discussion, we will have Q&A in the Q&A box below that you can ask questions of the panelists. And although we are going to, on our end, do our best technically to try and keep you muted and off of video, please do make sure that you stay quiet throughout the presentation unless you're participating. The reason for that is not so much to avoid distracting me. I don't mind. It's that, as you well know, on Zoom, you'll be all lit up in a yellow box and everyone know who will be causing the disturbance. So I urge you to keep yourself muted. And the other thing is we've got a navigation document that we've sent out to everyone. A link to that document is going to be posted in the chat box if it's not already. And I encourage you to have a look at that. It'll give you the opportunity to have links to presentations and others documents as well that you may find useful not only during the presentations, but afterward. So that's, I think, all that I have on the housekeeping. In terms of the agenda, and I see the navigation document is there. In terms of the agenda, I am, as I say, offering these few words of welcome, followed by the keynote presentation from the County Executive, Mark Elrich. I will tell you that when we put together the agenda, I didn't think this completely through, and I'm slightly embarrassed to have given myself 15 minutes for a welcome and then 15 minutes for Mark's presentation. So I'm going to do my best to cut my remarks short and either allow him or someone else to collect my minutes on the back end. We'll then have a robust business panel discussion, which will include Q&A before taking a break. And then we'll welcome Patty, the director of the Be Green Business Program, who specifically runs the Be Green Innovation Lab, to offer a few remarks and some words of thanks and introduce the networking session for the rest of the afternoon. And by way of thanks, let me just close off the agenda by taking a moment to thank Patty for putting this all together. Again, back to this concept of learning how to pivot in fragile times. Last year, we had a pretty robust, exciting, and entertaining event in person with speakers and presentations and opportunities to talk one-on-one. Obviously, we've had to completely transform the way we work, and Patty's owed a great debt of gratitude for pulling all of this together today in such a robust way. So on behalf of everyone attending, I would just thank Patty. As far as Bethesda Green goes, just a couple of words for those of you not familiar with our work. Bethesda Green, founded by Seth Goldman, the founder of Honest Tea, back in 2008. And our mission, our vision is that Bethesda specifically is a sustainable urban ecosystem. And we choose those words very, very deliberately. We believe in sustainability, but it's not just about the environmental projects that we undertake. It's about the ecosystem in which we all live. That's not just about the environment, it's about us as well. And I think that's really important. So on the one side of the operation of our nonprofit, we've got Be Green Living, where we're actually doing hands-on programs to benefit not only the environment, but the community, promoting recycling, street-level composting, stormwater mitigation, environmental education, We're even going out in the streets of Bethesda over the summer, assuming we still can, and pulling up weeds by hand so we don't have to resort to using pesticides. All of these efforts to make the ecosystem, the environment, protected and better for all of the residents of the city in a model that can be replicated in any community in the country. I mentioned environmental education, and we also have an environmental leaders program where we mentor high school students, giving them an opportunity to work in our office through a year-long internship, while we also teach them about environmental issues for their year-long science project. So we've got young people, the future generation who is really going to save the planet from the past, doing projects on upcycling textiles and looking at plastic pollution, looking at the negative impacts of the environment of industrial agriculture in the mid-Atlantic, and looking at issues related to overfishing. So we're really working with these kids to make sure the future is bright, and I think that's incredibly important, not only for them, but for all of us. And then lastly, of course, we have this program, our entrepreneurial work, the Be Green Innovation Lab, where we're working with young entrepreneurs, not necessarily young in terms of their own personal age, but in terms of where their business is, to bring more sustainability-focused businesses to our community in the hopes for the long-term benefit of our community and the entrepreneurs themselves. So because of our work, we're able to think about how we eat and how we farm and how we package goods and how we shop and overall how we live. And you'll be hearing from some of those entrepreneurs later, and I think you'll, obviously, I hope you'll find them as engaging and as exciting as I do. I know that when I gave this presentation a year ago at our event, I commented how important this work was to me personally, because I want the products and the services that our entrepreneurs are offering, and that holds true today, and you'll see why in a few minutes. And so that is about Bethesda Green. I will just close that part by saying I encourage you all to go to BethesdaGreen.org and check out some more of the work that we do. And if you believe in building a sustainable ecosystem, urban ecosystem, and the work that we do, I'll encourage you to lend us your support in whatever meaningful way you can, because as a nonprofit, we too have to pivot in these challenging and fragile times. And so my final responsibility is to introduce our keynote speaker, and I'm getting the one finger from Patty.
Adam, I just want to jump in, and I apologize for the interruption. It seems that we have two from Mark's staff who I think are in under one of the names, and I'm trying to kind of figure out which one may be him, but I think Mark may be here, just registered under a different name, and I'm having a hard time pulling him in. So if you pardon me just one moment, and I'll see if we can make this work. But yeah, just letting you know, I think he's here. I just can't find him.
Okay.
I will do that.
Great. Well, maybe I'll go ahead and blather on with the introduction of Mark.
Sure. That sounds good, and we'll see what we can do.
And you know, there are, to best of my count, 85 people here, and we could just pull Adam Ortiz in to talk or something.
We've got him. I thought we've got him.
Okay, so seamlessly transitioning to my introduction of our keynote speaker, let me just say this by way of introduction for Mark Elrich. He is the county executive, as I imagine everyone on this call knows, and normally it would be my responsibility to read a piece of his bio, but I'm not going to do that because everyone has already had access to his bio. Everyone can look up his bio. The important thing for us is that he is the county executive for Montgomery County. And for some people, Mark, as I've come to know him just in the year and a half that I've been on the job, is the call me Mark county executive. For some people, he's the don't wear a tie county executive. He is importantly to me the, yes, of course, I'll do the keynote presentation at your event, Mark. But I want to say two things about Mark Elrich as I've come to know him that's really important to me. One is that Mark, by his nature and by his profession, is a politician, right? And I've been in Washington for 30 years, and I've worked with politicians at all levels of government. And something that I have found about Mark is that he is easily the most accessible and thoughtful person I've ever had the privilege of speaking to when trying to advance an agenda that's important to me and to my work. The first time I saw Mark was at a listening session about the upcoming budget. And Mark did something that I think was incredibly important, which is that he frustrated his own staff who were trying to get him out of that meeting rather than frustrate the people who were there trying to ask him questions. He kept saying, I know it's time to go, but I'm going to keep answering questions as long as they're being asked. And that made an immediate impression on me in terms of his thoughtfulness and his accessibility to the public that he's supposed to serve and does serve. The second thing is, every time we've had an environmental groups meeting in his office, he invariably comes in, tells us all that he's only got a half an hour or only has an hour, and then after 90 minutes again, frustrates his staff who are trying to get him out of that meeting while he's talking to all of us. And so at his core, I've come to know Mark Elrich as a thoughtful, kind person who's also not only intelligent, but actually cares deeply about these issues, about environmental protection, about sustainability, about agricultural development and protecting the agricultural reserve, and about economic development in this county, and most importantly, the way all of those issues intersect. And it is because of that that he has my great respect, and that I'm so proud that he was willing to come and join us today and offer a few words. And with that, I will introduce the appropriately tireless Mark Elrich, the county executive.
How you doing? I didn't think I'd have to wear a tie today, so it's totally relaxing, and I like your view out of your window today. It's really nice. So I guess I'll say a few things. I mean, first of all, above all else, I'm an environmentalist, and I strongly believe that climate change is real. I did not have to be convinced of this. I've believed it for a very, very long time, but I also think that environmentalism is more than climate change. It's, preservation of the environment. It's preventing pollution. It's preventing the degradation of our land, and to some extent, the meaningless or exorbitant pursuit of resources without regard for the impacts on life on this planet. And I'm one of those believers who, thinks that we ought to be thinking about how do you do more with less, and instead of disposing of washing machines and dryers every 5 years, why can't we make things that last 10 years? I'm not sure that the highest, gross national product is necessarily a measure of your health. It's a measure of what you produce, but if you continue to produce things that you probably don't need, or if they were made better or made with a longer view, you probably wouldn't need. These are like more fundamental questions that we face. I think when I was in my 20s, I had that famous Mother Earth News poster up on in the wall, one of the walls in my house, that had the farm with the different, you and your friends were living in different houses on the farm, and you had a communal kitchen and a communal laundry room. And it was just a very idyllic thing. And I never got to the farm, wasn't able to achieve that. But it's something that, I always thought about and thought back then was really important. In this county, I've been involved in lots of different environmental battles. I was deeply involved in the effort to stop the ICC from being built. They had the option of taking an existing road and turning it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and probably would have solved the problem. Instead, they chose plowing an all-new 4-lane road through an area that really couldn't sustain that kind of environmental intrusion. I was involved in the first efforts to stop the incinerator, because I thought the incinerator was a mistake before we built it, and I still think it's a mistake now. And so these things matter deeply to me. When I was on the council early on, I got very involved in how do you solve the transportation problems in this county, and I became a proponent of bus rapid transit because I believed there was something we could afford to implement and that could radically change how people moved around the county. And I believe very strongly we have an obligation to reduce greenhouse gases and to make it easier for transit to become a viable option for more people. And that's one of the things I hope when this current mess is all over with, that we can kind of put our nose to the grindstone and begin really working on that kind of project in earnest. So coming to the county has been really interesting. I'd run saying I was going to shut down the incinerator, sounded like a great idea. And then we discovered that the previous county executive had signed an agreement extending the incinerator. We didn't know about it. The council didn't know about it. None of us were consulted on it. It was just, here's your inauguration gift. You can't get rid of the incinerator. We will get rid of it. It'll take us a few more years than we'd like, but I think the incinerator is just environmentally harmful, and it keeps us from trying to achieve other environmental goals. As long as I've got to fuel it, then it's an anti-incentive to look at reuse and recycling. And it's a disincentive to do that. And we need to figure out how we're going to move toward reuse and recycling. So I'm hoping that we start a pay-to-throw pilot in the county where we incentivize people to maximize recycling as a way of getting them to reduce the amount of stuff that has to go into but ultimately will wind up being a landfill. I'm hoping that we can, we're part of the efforts to look at plastic recycling differently. I've told people I want to monetize our plastic. It makes no sense to bundle it up and send it at low value for somebody else to clean up. And when I came in, we were looking at the possibility of turning into bricks that were suitable for construction or other plastic recycling that would turn it back into pellets that could then be recycled and be used to produce recycled plastic. And my intention is we're going to continue to pursue those other options. I'm a big believer in food recycling. And I believe this is something that we are going to move to. And we're going to be starting a pilot. So I'm excited about some of the directions that we're moving in, and hopefully we will get to do more, and hopefully we'll get a different federal government that goes back to incentivizing, encouraging, and frankly making it legally difficult to pollute and destroy the environment. I grew up with two big lessons on clean water and clean air. In both cases, the industry opponents, and pretty much all of industry opposed both those things, told us about how we were going to shut down the economy and destroy the universe, and this was never going to work, and you all were crazy. And we did it. Our water is cleaner than it ever was. Our air is cleaner than it ever was. It's not great in all cities, but it was a heck of a lot better than it was before. A significant change. And what grew up were other businesses. Because as soon as one business could sell you, like the PVC pump, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember PCV pumps on cars. Once somebody invented one thing, somebody else is out there trying to invent something cheaper and better. And that's one of the things about capitalism that actually works, is a drive to invent and innovate and improve on somebody else's idea in order to capture market share. And you can do that by having a better product and ultimately by having a less expensive product. So I thought those were things that were actually, are things we ought to be taking advantage of. And my life lessons from that was, if government requires things, it will be done and people will innovate, and it'll be done better and better as time goes on. And I think that's, continues to be true. The more we require food recycling and the more we require packaging recycling, industries are going to come around and they will find ways to make this work and to make it work to their advantage. And I don't care if they make it work to their advantage, as long as this place is cleaner and our lives are better. So that's sort of the framework in which I kind of look at the work we're doing. And I'm really happy to have Adam on board and really happy to have Adriana. They are real environmentalists. And they're not people that you have to convince that this, we have an environmental responsibility. They actually believe we have an environmental responsibility, and it's at their core. And it makes it a lot easier to start developing county policies when you can start with something like that. So you're kind of an incubator for us in the county, and a place where, environmentally oriented businesses have a chance to get started, nurtured, and to grow. And I'm hoping that the county's able, within the next year or so, to provide additional support for things like that. I'm a big believer in incubators, not just the high-tech stuff for, bio and IT, which have a place and they're really important and they can be really big. But for small companies looking to innovate and provide products and services that make a positive impact on the community. And so I'm looking forward to helping you and to facilitating this process in general in the county going forward. I'm a big supporter of small businesses. This is where the bulk of the jobs are. And anytime I talk to people about small businesses, I would be remiss if I didn't try to nudge you toward some form of worker involvement or cooperative structures. I'm a big believer in cooperatives, and it came out of my experience. I worked in the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Co-op for many years, and did a lot of reading about co-ops, particularly co-ops in Europe. And one of the things that I found very inspirational was a set of co-ops in Mondragon, Spain, that are the dominant economic force now in that area. And they went from very small to very, very large. And they produce many, many diverse products, have a credit union, grocery stores. They vertically integrated, or horizontally integrated, I guess what you would say. They're, all through all parts of the economy. And by having workers as part of the decision-making process, they actually strengthen your companies. When I was in the co-op, I found the more workers knew about the business, the more they understood the importance of their work. If you just sign into a job and you sign out and you're just an employee, then you assume the manager knows what he's doing and you assume you're going to get a paycheck, but you're not necessarily vested in the day-to-day operations. And when you become an employee owner of a business, then everything matters to you, because everything translates into your paycheck and it translates into your benefits. And so I tell people that one of the examples in the cafe the co-op ran is if you burn something, or you'll say you overcook the brownies and you toss them, you spent a lot of money to make them and you just lost all your profits and your labor time. So we would do things like take slightly overdone brownies and grind them up and turn them into the crust for a really good cheesecake. And they functioned as the crust for a really good cheesecake really well. And so your labor wasn't lost and the profits weren't lost. But it was employees looking at the job differently and say, how do I turn something that could have been a loss into something that's a gain? So I'm hoping that, you all think about that stuff. But at the end of the day, the most important things you're going to do are, how do you drive us toward a zero waste economy? How do you look at producing things that are reusable and recyclable and don't result in more one-time things that we use and dispose of? When you're providing us services, how many services can people come up with and provide that can replace services that are either unhealthy or unsafe or don't provide or use raw materials inappropriately? These are opportunities that you all can play an enormous role in. Getting us to zero greenhouse gases. That's a road to haul. And we signed on to this knowing that there was no magic bullet and actually no path for getting there. If there was a path for getting there, we'd all be on it. We'd be, buying this, that, or the other thing and be installing it tomorrow, and we'd be there in 2 years and it'd be over and done with. But the fact remains that there are impediments in energy production, energy storage, insulating buildings without having to tear them apart and make it really, really costly to try to do it. So there are a lot of things out there that people can and should be working on, and I think they're great opportunities for innovation. In the agricultural sector, helping our agricultural sector be more resilient and also become a greater contributor to the local food market. Our food, almost everything we wind up buying comes from farther away, much farther away. And it's one of the things about life that's changed. When I was growing up, the only fruits and vegetables you saw were things that could get here before they spoiled. And we weren't shipping, I wasn't getting fruits and vegetables in the winter that weren't seasonal. But now we import from all around the world, and we've pushed mass agriculture to lots of different places with all the labor problems that come with it and all the environmental problems that also come with it. And we've got this wonderful ag reserve here that's been sensibly preserved. The farmers there were into commodity crops before the agricultural reserve became the ag reserve, and they're still largely into commodity crops today. We need to help provide markets and opportunities for farmers to transition from commodity to table crops. Then we need to look at ways of providing table crops that are available all year long, and that may mean hoop houses and greenhouses. There's a project that I saw in Cleveland that was started by a group out of the University of Maryland, the Commonwealth group. And the idea there was they put greenhouses on buildings, large greenhouses, and they now were growing about 1 million heads of lettuce a year, which they sold to the local restaurants and stores. And I think we can do things like that here. I've got garages where I can stack up greenhouses. I've seen greenhouses where the trays rotate and they go up 30 feet in the air and rotate all day long through the greenhouse. And they're worked on when they get to the bottom, and then another layer goes up and the other one comes in front of the workers. It's a really interesting system. Those kind of innovations we can bring here, and I invite people to be part of that innovation network. There are a lot of good ideas out there that require refinement. And if you see something good and can figure out a way to make it better and implementable here, I think we want to know about it. We do want to work with our farmers. I think one of the things in conversations I've had with them is nobody wants to grow table crops without a way to get them to market. And you can't rely on people coming and picking everything that you need. And a lot of crops have very short life cycles. So you grow a lot of tomatoes, and the amount of tomatoes you grow may exceed the demand for tomatoes in any given moment. But if we had canning facilities or processing facilities to go with this, we might be able to make tomato growing a more lucrative venture in this county. And so those are the kind of things I think also that would be great to be looking at. I think, the efforts to buy local, we need to double down on. We should definitely give preferences. And, one of the things that we have implemented is preferences for local businesses in the county, preferences on points and preferences on price, so the local businesses can get an advantage. And the reason we did that is if I give you money, you're going to spend the money here. You're going to pay your mortgage or rent in this county. You're going to shop in this county. So pretty much everything I give you winds up back in the county. Whereas if I give money to companies that are outside of Montgomery County, we never see it again. And so the money is one and done. There's no circulation. And so the value of buying local is those dollars circulate and they help keep other people employed here and help other businesses expand here. And we want to make sure that we're able to further that in the county. And I want to be a part of that. And I want you to be a part of it. And I want you to look at, innovations. We've got a guy in the county government, Michael Baskins, who is working with our employees on how to innovate in the workplaces. And people might find it interesting to take one of these courses where employees are actually trained to look at their job sites and identify things that they think they could probably improve, and go through a training where at the end of the training, they're told, now pick a project and come back in a few weeks with how you're going to address the project. And again, before COVID started, I've been to several of the presentations by employees, and it was really amazing that people had actually looked at their departments and come up with ways to run things better. And I think all of us can learn from innovation and how do you look at a problem and how do you look at a problem differently. I know I was reading Steve Jobs, and I'm not going to say everything that Steve Jobs said, but one of the things he talked about was, if I hand an engineer a problem, and he's only been to engineering school and his perspective came from engineering school, if engineering school taught you couldn't solve the problem, he starts on the premise that you couldn't solve the problem. If you don't know you can't solve a problem, then you try to solve the problem. And sometimes not being taught something is an opportunity for people to discover things they didn't know and discover things that other people didn't know. Because if you always limit our horizons to what the person before us knew And we can't know more than that, then we preclude ourselves from being the people who discover new and better ways of doing things. So that was one of the things about Jobs I actually liked. Other flaws, but his thinking about how to look at the creative process, I thought was really important. And I encourage people to continually look at the creative process. If somebody tells you you can't do it and you can't see why you can't do it, keep wondering whether you can do it. That will drive you to do, I think, amazing things. So we're looking at other things. I'd be happy, to engage with your group more regularly. I think it would be good to talk about where you see innovation opportunities and what kind of support you think the county can provide, particularly in a tad more healthy climate, where we can be more supportive of what it takes for you guys to innovate and innovate greenly so that everybody in this county benefits. So I think I'll stop there, but I really do appreciate what you do. I've always liked this organization. I know George Leventhal was, a good part of getting this thing up and off the ground. And it's a good legacy project. And I want everybody to, you should feel good about what you do. And you should look at the county as your partner. And we should figure out how we can help you so that you play a more and more prominent role in the local economy here. Thank you.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Mark. Patty, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark. I'm so glad that you were really able to join us today. That worked out, and I apologize for the logistical challenges there. It's so exciting that Bethesda Green's Innovation Lab is just one part of kind of the bigger ecosystem that exists here. And really having Montgomery County as a partner, I agree. Excellent. It's really an honor. As Adam mentioned earlier, my name is Patty Simonton. I'm the director of the Be Green Business Program here at Bethesda Green. And just briefly, I'd like to call out a special thanks to the folks who helped me pull this event together, especially Marisa, Adam, and all of the volunteers who you may encounter as you jump in on the individual networking Zoom rooms we have later today. Kicking off here, I'm just going to share this real fast. I'm thrilled to introduce our business panel here today. These are 4 amazing individuals with deep backgrounds in the entrepreneurial community as founders and investors, and who are joining us today to discuss how businesses pivot when markets change, the impact the pandemic will have on the future of entrepreneurship, and how entrepreneurs can take steps to avoid likely hurdles. Allison Redpath is the Director of Entrepreneurship and Small Business at the Maryland Department of Commerce. In this role, she directs and manages the agency's involvement in the early stage ecosystem with the goal of encouraging and supporting new business formation and growth. Her background includes extensive experience in capital raising, mergers and acquisitions, and financial analysis and valuation. And she served as the Director of Investment Banking at both Schroders and Citigroup. Allison founded Citrine Angels, an angel investor network, in order to help improve access for capital for female-founded startups by facilitating and encouraging participation in early stage investing in the DC metro area. We're thrilled that you're here, Allison. Thank you. Jigar Shah is the co-founder of Generate Capital, an investment and operating platform that builds, owns, operates, and finances infrastructure assets involving the world's critical resources, including energy, water, agriculture, and basic materials. Generate's team has decades of collective experience financing billions of dollars of sustainable infrastructure. Jigar is best known as the founder of SunEdison, best known, maybe, probably, where he pioneered no money down solar and unlocked a multi-billion-dollar solar market, creating the largest solar services company worldwide. I'm thrilled to say that Jigar is also a senior advisor for our innovation lab. So thank you. I'm so glad you're able to join us. Mark Walsh was once introduced as someone who connects the dots, .com, .edu, .org, .gov. Mark served as the head of the Office of Innovation and Investment at the U.S. Small Business Administration during the final years of the Obama administration. He has a rich background that includes organizations that changed the marketplace they were in, including HBO, AOL, Blackboard, and VerticalNet. Mark also served as the Chief Technology Advisor for the Democratic National Committee, and then the head of the Internet Strategy for John Kerry's presidential campaign. So thank you, Mark. I'm glad you're here. And last but not least, our panel moderator today will be Jolene Gurovich. Jolene is the manager of the Chesapeake Bay Seed Capital Fund and the MTech Venture Incubator at the University of Maryland. In her dual role, she oversees a $500,000 yearly allocation from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to invest in promising clean tech startups. She also supports faculty and graduate students at the University of Maryland who are commercializing deep science technology. Prior to joining the MTech Ventures team, Jolene was an early employee at Aluvu, a SaaS startup in Baltimore. I love that name, Aluvu. There she held several roles, including finance, operations, and account management. As a 2014 Venture for America Fellow, Jolene moved to Baltimore to build a more inclusive future through entrepreneurship and has been in Maryland ever since. While we do not anticipate that we'll have too much time for questions, we are going to try and open it up to the attendees. So please submit questions using the Q&A feature, and we'll see if we can squeeze them in. All right, panelists, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Patty. Panelists, I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm thrilled to be here and really excited for this discussion. Today, we're going to focus on how we as investors, advisors, policymakers, and most importantly, entrepreneurs should adapt in the face of uncertainty. As we all know, we're in the midst of a global pandemic that's seemingly only going to get worse. It was just announced this week that the US is officially in a recession and our real unemployment rate is close to 20%. At the same time, we're also seeing massive protests in all 50 states and around the world in opposition to police brutality and institutionalized racism. Each of these crises on their own would have serious implications for the way that we do business, but together these are massive forces that will change the face of work, wealth, and entrepreneurship for years to come. So to kick it off, Allison, I'd like to start with you. How should businesses pivot when markets change?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I think is the most important thing for any business is to first accept that the past is gone. I think that a lot of times people want to believe, well, if we just, revise our plan a little bit incrementally here and there, we can make it work. And I think for most businesses, at least as a minimum, as an exercise, start over. Pretend you landed here from another planet and you landed and you have these assets. Maybe it's the team, maybe it's your technology. And you look around and say, what's going on with the market? What do consumers want? What are my potential customers looking for? And what are the trends? And where do I think they're going? And work from there. So in a way, I think as an exercise, it would be helpful to start with a blank sheet of paper and build in a lot of flexibility, because nobody can predict the future. And however, pivoting is a fact of life, really, for entrepreneurs. And Jolene, you made a very good point that this is the word unprecedented, I think, has been used quite frequently in the last few months, right? And this is a combination of every calamity we've seen in the last 100 years put together, right? So if you can survive this, you're doing amazingly well. And I think just for entrepreneurs out there, we're not done. Like, things are going to continue to change. So be ready for it.
Yeah, thank you. Jigger, I'd like to ask you, given that you have such a large portfolio, what have you advised companies in your portfolio to do right now in order to survive this crisis?
Well, in general, I think what we've said is that, things are going to be longer and deeper than people expect, right? So to the extent that you expect that everything's going to go back to normal next week, that's not going to happen, largely because something on the order of 20% or so of demand in the United States has been destroyed. So whether that's people ordering from restaurants or whatnot, right? The way GDP works is you get more GDP if you have a more refined product, right? So if you, sew buttons back on your shirt by yourself, like, that's not part of GDP. If you give it to a dry cleaner and actually have them do it, that's part of GDP, right? So a lot of what we're doing is we're having a lot of destruction around the edges, right? And so I think it's going to take some time for the Federal Reserve and the federal government and all the different bodies to sort of bring everything back up to speed. And so, be patient and recognize that this is going to be a little longer and deeper than they expect.
That's great. Mark, do you have any other advice for entrepreneurs right now?
Well, first, I just want to comment on what the county executive said. I'm never going to eat cheesecake the same way again, because I know it's completely surrounded by burnt brownies. It's funny, I think Allison's point is well taken, and I would ask those in the panel to Google the 5 stages of grief. If you know that, it's, it's the denial, and then bargaining, and then anger, and then grief, and then acceptance. And I think we're all sort of in that process somewhere of the new, not the new normal, I think the new, because I think there's really not going to be normality for a while, as Jigger suggested. So the advice I would give the companies that I've invested in as an angel investor, both on the East Coast or around the US, is 2 things: conserve cash and conserve customers. As we know, a chunk of our customers may disappear forever because of chunks of the economy that are gone. But if we love our current customers and take care of them, the opportunities to shift, which are going to be quite common because there's a lot of desperation in poaching customer bases. So love your customers. And my first piece of advice isn't very new, but conserving cash is going to be really important because folks like Jigger or other vendors or other providers of capital, Allison and her colleagues, or angel investors like myself, we're just going to look a lot harder at deals, and looking harder at deals or maybe follow-on investments in deals we're already in, just going to get tougher. So make sure you conserve cash.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The Great Depression of the 1930s has been called the most technologically progressive time of the 20th century. And I think that every entrepreneur here would agree that necessity is the mother of all invention. So we are almost, if not already at, a tipping point with climate change, which is going to necessitate next-gen solutions in areas, as the county executive mentioned, in agriculture, transportation, energy storage. What are some climate-related industries or technologies that have been overlooked in the past that you expect to be surprise winners in the coming years? And Jigger, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, that's great. I thought the county executive was quite, eloquent on a lot of these points. I think the one thing I would push him on and push many folks on is that when you have a 20% hole in the economy, the best way to fill it is with sort of government dollars, right? That's sort of the whole Keynesian approach. Now, if you don't want to just flush the money down the toilet, like one of the ways to do it is to deploy climate solutions, right? And most of them are proven. So to give you some examples, only about 48% of lighting within government buildings has been converted to LED. So you got another 52% to go. Everyone knows it saves money, but they haven't gotten around to it, hasn't been prioritized, et cetera. But the same thing's true with, for instance, like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Many of those units are, on their last leg. Last year, I think Montgomery County schools had 6 schools that didn't open on time. And so kids were not allowed to go to school for the first 2 weeks because their air conditioning didn't work. These are the kinds of things that you can actually get to fix, right? You can actually replace those things with green refrigerants. For many people who know, like HFC 134A, which is what we use to prevent the ozone from degrading, is about 4,000 times worse for the planet than CO2. And so replacing it with green refrigerants is where everything's going now. And oh, by the way, when you leak HFC 134A, the EPA has been fining people because it's really bad for the planet, right? So you can actually prevent fines by getting a lot of this stuff done. So a lot of what the government looks at here on the climate side is what they call deferred maintenance, and what we call is an opportunity to green all the infrastructure. So I think that's one big area. The other area I would say is really around mandates. And I think that in the US, we've been quite hesitant to do that, even with, the county commissioner who has a lot of progressive roots. So for instance, there's a tremendous amount of data out of Asia around the fact that, we're entirely too car focused and car centric. And if you actually take a lot of the roads and, just close them off to car traffic, it's amazing that you don't actually increase traffic, but you do increase tremendously economic development and growth, right? People actually like to walk on streets that don't have a lot of car pollution. They like to eat outside restaurants where buses aren't going by with diesel exhaust, et cetera, right? So a lot of those kinds of experiments, et cetera, people are ripe for that now. And so I think that that's a lot of what you can do. And the last piece that the county commissioner talked about was, or county executive talked about, was waste. We already have compost facilities that we feature in the area, and we actually collect compost from people's homes. But, you know, right now it's an opt-in strategy, and even the most recent proposals from the county are opt-in. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, I mean, New York City has mandatory compost at every single building. We could have mandatory compost every single building too, right? And so some of these things are things that have been piloted, they've been done, they've been proven, and we just are not quite ready to just roll stuff out. But while we're looking for ways of promoting economic development, you know, good proven ideas at scale in the climate space are a good place to start.
I see Mark has something to add. Go ahead.
So I have 2.5 quick ideas around this arena. First is work from home. I think there'll be some new businesses that sprout up that basically train us all to be better at working from home, not just using Zoom, but collaborative tools, which there are plenty of collaborative tools, but being good at using collaborative tools is actually kind of hard to do. So I think there'll be an educational component of work from home that actually increases the number of people that are comfortable doing it and the productivity of it. The second is, for those of you who remember the company O-Power, I think the gamification of saving energy, making it a competitive environment. I mean, the rise of e-games alone for millennials and younger is a huge, huge wave. And I think turning the environment, saving the environment into a gamification platform is going to continue at pace. And the third, or half of one, is not really about the main arena we're talking about, but it's one I feel is going to be kind of overall, and that's about privacy and the retrieval of our own privacy. The amount of data that's being gathered about us, be it where our car is or what our postal intake is on our mailbox, just the mind reels at how much data we're generating as individuals or even as corporations. And I think retrieving the capacity to manage our data, in fact, even erase it. The final phrase I'll use is Germany, they say the right to be forgotten. I think there's going to be significant software and other tactical development around privacy.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Really quickly before I move on, Jigger, I see your background photo. Does that mean that your predictions for the future also have something to do with methane?
Well, this is a photo from the largest renewable natural gas digester in the country, which we own, and there'll be a lot more, I think, RNG that gets done. We produce over 100 million tons of food waste in this country, and while there's lots of initiatives by which we can reduce that food waste, getting it to zero is pretty hard, and figuring out what to do with it productively and not letting it rot in landfills is, I think, a pretty smart move.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Switching gears here slightly. The Maryland entrepreneurship ecosystem, I think, does so many things right. We have MBIA, which is a statewide network of all of the incubators and accelerators. We have TEDCO, which funds and supports many early stage startups. We have alumni from successful Maryland companies that have gone on to start, mentor, and invest in the next crop of companies. We do so many things right. But Allison, I'm wondering, what would it take to get to the next level of success for our ecosystem in terms of entrepreneurial support?
Sure. Yeah, this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently because, as you know, I just started with the Maryland Department of Commerce a few months ago, and this was a new position. So they were specifically looking for someone who could identify the needs as well as, pursue solutions. And, there's a couple of things that I'll already have identified, but one, I would say generally, I would define success as a couple of different things. First, that people here stop comparing themselves to Silicon Valley, because it's really and I know Mark's applauding because we've talked about this before, because, we have, and, identify and appreciate and capitalize on the assets that we do have here, because we have a robust federal lab system, right? There's in the state of Maryland, there's 78 federal labs. I mean, think about how much technology comes out of NIH and NASA, and I mean, the whole cyber sector, right, is driven by that here. And, the second thing I would say is regional cooperation, because I see sometimes that different geographic areas are competing with each other, and that's a waste of time and resources, really. So I think a move towards regional cooperation and, really effective regional cooperation would be a success factor. And ultimately, I would say that I would define success as national recognition of what we're doing and seeing the collaboration between different types of entities, because since we do have such a a significant government component here in this area because of the federal government. You know, it's not just about the VCs all talking to each other, right? It's about different types of organizations working well together. And I think we can achieve that. I think we have a little ways to go, but I think it's on the table.
That's interesting. Mark, so I know that you have very strong opinion on what our region should not be. So in your eyes, you know, to build on what Allison just said, what should we strive for, you know, and maybe what doesn't exist in our ecosystem right now that will enable taking all of the innovation coming out of the federal labs and to capitalize on our competitive advantage here? What do we need to do? I'm sorry, Mark, you're muted. No, I think you're still muted.
The ultimate example of how people aren't good at Zooming, I just gave you one. So to answer your question, and this may sound coy, and I don't mean to be coy, but I think a sense of pride. I mean, screw them on the West Coast. You know, we do billions and billions and billions of dollars of interesting technology development and M&A and deployment. And I think in some ways, everyone cedes, CEDES, everyone cedes the mantle of innovation and development and deployment and value to the West Coast. You know, 60% of what's in this device, a mobile telephone, comes from SBIR grants out of your federal tax dollars through the SBA. And I think that we need a sense of pride, maybe not pride, maybe a sense of swagger that in fact, if you look at the number of companies that are founded here, that the amount of M&A dollars that occur here, the number of ideas that matter to our daily lives, both domestically and internationally, and our corporate daily lives, I think it blows away almost any other sector. And the final point I'll make is our education component. I think we have, 104 people now as participants, and I bet there's schools represented on this panel listening to us that are some of the finest educational facilities around, both undergraduate and graduate. So, you know, why should Stanford and Cal be the kingdom when in fact we have it all right here?
So there's been a lot of talk about sort of a capital funding gap in this area, that there aren't dollars around to take companies from the R&D phase to the commercialization phase. Based on your experience, you know, as an investor, and also as part of the Obama administration funding this kind of R&D, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, public-private partnerships are a little dicey. When they're done right, they're amazing. When they're not, it gets, you know, you go back to what was the solar company that was supposed to be lost $500 million on. Jigger will probably remember. But anyway, yeah. What is it again?
Solyndra.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up stuff. But I mean, I think that.
Starting to itch.
Yeah. Sorry, brother. So I think that public-private partnerships are dicey. When done right, they're amazing. I happen to believe that the federal government is actually going to start to back off a little bit from public-private partnerships. I think there's a lot of challenges in many agencies about frankly, the innovation or the changes that they're being asked to go through this administration. So I think in some ways it's going to end up being more Allison Redpath's and other types of state or even county level stuff that's going to end up having an impact. I think our keynote speaker really kind of represented so much of what we're talking about. His specific endorsement and enthusiasm and encouragement for what Bethesda Green is doing right now, I think those kernels of innovation will end up sprouting potentially more importantly and maybe even more rapidly than large federal dollars coming in at large macro public-private partnerships. So I'm a big fan of small is bigger.
And Jigger, as an entrepreneur and now as an investor, what are your thoughts on one, the potential funding gap in this area, and two, what it would take for our ecosystem to really go to the next level, whatever that
means? So I would say that Mark's absolutely right. I mean, what we need here is more swagger. Like, I think that when you think about, I mean, the solar power purchase agreement was invented in Maryland, right? And now has attracted over $1 trillion of capital and is heralded as why everybody has hope on climate change. So, you know, I think the notion that Maryland hasn't really offered, you know, these great innovations that rival and actually surpass California is ridiculous. I think, you know, one of the things that I'd say is that in the physical infrastructure space, which is what I work in, I mean, climate change by and large is physical infrastructure, right? Whether it's roads, bridges, agriculture. It's all the Association of Civil Engineers report, gives us a D- on our infrastructure. It's all that stuff, right, that needs to be decarbonized. The biggest problem that we have is that people in California are used to raising money into the corporate, right? You just keep losing money until you don't, right? In the East Coast, the way you do it is by growing the business via revenue, right? Not via investment. And where, I think Mark and the county and then the governor can play a much bigger role is by giving people more revenue, right? For a lot of the technologies that they've invented, the University of Maryland has already proven their technology works. I mean, that was part of the R&D that they got from the SBIR grants and all that stuff. Now what they need is the county to say, here's $1 million to go deploy your technology at our incinerator site or at this place or at that place and give people revenue, right? And I just feel like instead what they say is, why don't you just pilot it here for free? And then that forces the entrepreneur to go out and try to get corporate equity, right, to do that. And necessarily a lot of people are hesitant to do that because, you by and large don't get, 20x or 100x returns on investments in the physical infrastructure space. You might get 3x returns, which is still a 20% return. It's great. But, I think that we just need to do more work on pioneering ways in which to give these companies contracts and revenue, as opposed to forcing them to go out and raise corporate capital.
I think your point about providing contracts and customers to startups is spot on. As an employee at the University of Maryland, we work with so many of these startups, and it's really hard to get them contracts with the university. So I'll take your point. We have a question from Philip Ha, and his question is for Mark. And Jigger, I think you'll have some commentary here as well. How do you get past the inherent hurdle that physical R&D is so much harder to attract VC funding for? And isn't that one of the main economies of scale that Silicon Valley is built on?
Well, yeah. I mean, Mark Benioff, the Salesforce Tower in the middle of San Francisco is built on ones and zeros. So I get it. And there's a clear ease of pathway for ones and zeros to become huge companies and deliver massive shareholder value. But that's kind of a superstar economy where there are a few companies that just go past everything. And that's where we got the FANG companies, which I would argue is in some ways not a good thing to have that kind of concentration of power. And I guess the easy answer, and it's easy because it's easy for me to say, but hard for Philip or anybody to do, is to talk to different types of VCs. I think there are venture capital firms that don't get a lot of press that are up and down the East Coast. I mean, in my prior career, I was CEO of a company based in Philadelphia. I had no idea of the venture capital community vibrancy around Philadelphia and Wilmington. No idea. Because their personalities just are frankly a little less superstar oriented. So I know their directories and I know their contacts. I know their beauty contests and I know their accelerators and incubators, but I would argue, keep driving down in the VC community or at least dive deeper into it. And I'm sure you'll see VCs that understand physical products and service platforms as opposed to ones and zeros in the next, yo-yo dine game company.
Yeah, I think, Jigger, that's also to your point about sort of swagger and branding. It's hard to find these VCs. Do you have anything to add on that?
The only other thing I'd add there is basically that I think that Silicon Valley hasn't done that well in the physical space, right? So the folks who got money and gave money to folks, a few years ago, all of those venture capital funds are underwater, right? So I would say the best venture capital funds in the physical space are probably out of Boston, and then SJF down out of North Carolina. So I don't think it's the Silicon Valley firms that have done the best on physical infrastructure. They have taken the software angle around climate change, fintech companies and folks like that, and absolutely done well there, but I don't think they've done that well in the physical space.
Okay, that's really interesting. Just to switch gears slightly, and Mark, you alluded to this a little bit, but I think what makes this region so unique is the access to policymakers and government leaders. So Allison, given your role, what do you think is the role of policymakers in making innovation and entrepreneurship accessible to marginalized communities at the state and local level?
Yeah, I think that's more important than ever, because what's happened in the pandemic in the last few months is that smaller companies and earlier stage companies have been hit harder, and those tend to have a higher proportion of minority founders and owners. And so it's at the Department of Commerce, where we've been focused very much on trying to find ways to have an inclusive recovery. And building on a little bit on what Mark said earlier, is that I think a lot of it is a big component which can help significantly is information flow and connecting the right people to the right resources. Because there's so many people I see in the state who are not aware of terrific programs like Bethesda Green, like other kinds of programs that could benefit them, and aren't aware of all the resources that we do have in the state. So that's one of the things that we're working towards.
When I was at the SBA, I used to remind people that the U.S. government is the world's worst marketer. Our branding, I mean, imagine SBA, they call it, 8A loans, right? That's not a very, very compelling brand name for an amazing program. So to Allison's point, if the U.S. or state or even local governments were just a little bit better at marketing and having a web presence or some way for you to wind your way through the path to find the right people or the right budget, we get a lot better at this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Allison, to follow up on that, are there any programs that you think entrepreneurs should be aware of that maybe aren't super well publicized at the state level?
Well, there is, since we're talking about minorities, there is a program called VLT, which is a video lottery terminal funding program, because a percentage of the revenues from the casinos go to this fund, which is specifically designated for minority startups. So I would suggest if I was gonna pull out one in this context, I would say look into that one.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And Mark, from your experience, are there any federal programs that minority entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Yes, my old area of SBICs, Small Business Investment Companies, and SBIR, Small Business Investment Research, and accelerators and incubators, we had several programs. I won't bore the attendees, but SBA's website can drive you through. They were aimed at demographic diversity of capital deployment. They were aimed at geographic diversity of capital deployment. They were aimed at gender diversity of capital deployment, and they were aimed at industry level diversity of capital deployment. So if you think of that sort of four box square, industry, gender, demographic diversity, and geographic, it was a pretty robust way of deploying capital. That being said, final point is we also had place-based deployment of capital for regions that were under great duress. So like the Flint, Michigan of 2016 would have been a focus on some of the government deployment programs under my purview, because the places like Flint, of course, had tremendous challenges back in the day. So I think those types of behaviors happen every single day in the federal government. And I'll conclude with this. The fact that I'm telling you and the fact that I'm talking about it, and very few of us know, is part of the challenge. The U.S. government has to get better at reaching out to people and telling them what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. We have a great question from Greg Payne in the audience. He asks, do you know of any small to medium-sized Maryland towns and cities who are doing an excellent job in developing greater environmental sustainability and resilience? And the second part of the question is, what needs to be done at the state and local level to help these municipalities develop more resilience? And I'll open that up to whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not an easy answer. Tacoma Park has done a lot, for instance. I'd say that one of the things that you have to recognize as a small town, and small really is defined as anything less than, actually even up to 200,000 people, the contract sizes that they're able to put out are so small that you can't attract the biggest firms. You can't attract Johnson Controls, Nikon, Siemens, these other big engineering firms. They really want a minimum of like a $50 to $100 million contract. And these small towns, the best you can do on energy efficiency, waste, et cetera, are sort of like $3 million contracts, $2 million contracts. And so what you have to do is to focus on the smaller regional energy service companies. So there's a good group here in Bethesda, and I forgot my friend's company name, but Brad Doxter runs a company here, I think it's Global Green or something. And, so he focuses in that size range. And so you've got to find people who focus in that size range, and so therefore they'll give you good customer service. The other piece of it is you got to do mandates. So for instance, Tacoma Park actually provided a mandate to Clean Choice Energy, which is a Maryland-based retail electricity provider that is, in I think 12 states now or something. And they exclusively provide renewable electricity from new facilities. But they gave Clean Choice Energy a mandate through a sort of competitive process to be able to walk door to door and get, I think it was like over 60% of all customers in Tacoma Park are now converted. Brad Doxter's company's name is called Green Gen. But, so if you don't do something that prescriptive, then getting the right amount of talent to come in and dedicate their intellectual capital on building your resiliency is very difficult. One last thing I'd say is like, Montgomery County hired Schneider Electric to get all the microgrids set up for its police stations and fire, stations, et cetera. So I do think that there are case studies in the area.
So I would argue, as opposed to a vertical slice like a town doing well, I might suggest a horizontal slice. And I know my bride is very involved in composting for country clubs and golf courses around this area. And I know actually one of the attendees of this effort is listening to us right now, is partnering with her. Company he runs does this. And I would say, horizontally, if we could get every golf course in the state of Maryland, and there are many golf courses in the state of Maryland, for those of you who don't play golf, or country clubs surrounding them, to get better at composting the meals they serve. Well, sorry, times have changed, but even the meals that they prepare, simple things like that at a horizontal level by a type of company can have huge effect. And I would just toss in what I think Jigger and Allison are even echoing, which is mandating that kind of behavior, which sometimes can sound like, socialism, but I think mandating behavior, or certainly encouraging behavior through tax structures and others, is where it's going to have to end up anyway.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Allison, did you have anything to add to that?
Not specifically. Environmental is not an area I focus on specifically. I would just generally mention that one thing that's perhaps different or an opportunity in this situation is that consumers are changing their behaviors really quickly and really fast compared to what they normally do. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to make changes in a positive direction on a lot of this.
Yeah, we've seen companies and governments make changes in the past few weeks that they said would take years and decades to make. So that's a great point. So as we reach the close of our discussion today, I'd like you all to look towards the future and imagine that we are 50 years from now and the pandemic has come and gone. Do you think that we'll look back on this period of crisis and call it one of a few things: the Great Reset, the Great Reversal, or the Great Accelerator, and why? And in this imagined future, how does entrepreneurship play a role in getting us there? And let's start with you, Jigger.
Well, I've been working in this, climate solution space for the better part of 20 years. And I think when you think about where we are today, we were at the cusp of really breaking out in a big way anyway, right? The Tesla Model 3 is now the most purchased car in California, beyond the Toyota Camry, the Honda Civic, whatever else, right? So electric vehicles have broken through. Same thing's true with solar panels on people's roofs. So same with 100% clean electricity standards, right? And so I think we're already there in terms of the policy and the 3.8 million people who work in the sectors, right, that actually are trained and do good work, right? So I think we're already there. And I think when you look at what it's going to take to reset our economy, it may take us 4 or 5 false starts to get there just because we've got a fairly incompetent administration. But at some point, people will learn that infrastructure is the only way to start this back up. Like, we're not going to go to, figuring out how to get people to shop again just by telling people to shop, right? That's not how this works. There's going to be an infrastructure component to this. And the easiest place to do that is in the places that save a lot of money, which is decarbonization. So I think that is where things are going to go. And I think 50 years from now, you are going to see people view that. But, it's going to be rocky to get from here to there.
Mm-hmm. Also, Jigger, I see Brad Doxer has posted in the chat.
Yes, he's
so
very kind to do so.
Everyone reach out to Brad if you're interested. Allison, what are your thoughts on this? How do you think we're going to look back on this period? And what do you think the impact of these sort of dual crises will be on what we value moving forward?
Well, that's a big question. Well, and to your original question, I would say perhaps this is going to be the great pivot or the great shift, because, even though the whole economy is taking a hit, it's very industry specific, right? Like, it's not even across the board. It's taken across. Certain sectors are getting crushed. Certain sectors are doing okay, and certain sectors are benefiting. For example, anything that's wellness related. If you try and buy supplements lately, they're all back ordered, right? Because everybody's, so I think it's gonna be a shift. And, to your question about what people value, that is, I think, less a business question, but it ends up driving consumer demand. So it affects companies that, a lot of people have found that or a lot of the articles I have seen have been saying that they expect to be a less emphasis on consumerism. That people, they're shut up in their homes for many, many months, and they're starting to realize, what really matters. If they have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of resources to spend, it's going to be family, it's going to be friends. It's not necessarily going to be like the cool designer thing that they can show off at the next party, right? So I think it's those kind of things that are going to affect businesses longer term.
That's really interesting. Mark, given your sort of long history and experience in industries as they were sort of seeing their peak, what are your thoughts on this? How are we going to look back on this time?
Well, hopefully I saw them when they were going to their peak. I didn't see them at their peak, and then I was part of the drop.
That's what I meant.
I think the 3 labels you tossed out are maybe slicing the words a little thin. So I'll suggest this. I think the 2 outcomes of what's happening now within people is going to be a rediscovering the cherishing of resiliency and self-sufficiency. Those 2, I think, are very thematic, that most Americans are going to end up seeing that they either have discovered themselves or need to develop resiliency and self-sufficiency. And I believe that companies, large, medium, or small, that exhibit those features or have products or services that sort of amplify those features are going to find themselves really, really attractive to sort of the next wave or the rebounding wave of consumer behavior and even corporate behavior. So I think those 2 features, by the way, also build trust. And I think something that's kind of been shattered in a wide variety of places, both in the economy and consumer behavior, business behavior, even government, is trust. So I think resiliency, self-sufficiency will create a sense of trust. And companies that are able to present that and deliver on it are going to be very, very successful.
All right. Well, everyone in the audience, you heard it here first. Just to wrap things up, I'd like to ask each of you if you have any resources that you would like to shout out to the folks in the audience that can help entrepreneurs and all of the folks who support those entrepreneurs make it through this time. And, whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Obviously, Bethesda Green. It's amazing. Everyone should reach out to Bethesda Green. I do a weekly podcast called The Energy Gang. So for energy-related entrepreneurs and climate-related entrepreneurs, I think we have a pretty good following and cover a lot of relevant topics there.
That's great.
So I will echo. I think Bethesda Green is a great spot. I mean, obviously we're biased because you paid me to say that. And I'm joking, that didn't happen. No, but I mean, it's a wonderful session, and we've seen great companies are going to present in just a minute, and Mark did a fantastic job teeing us off. But I would also, I don't know who pays attention to this, but Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway have a weekly podcast that I just find really, really eye-opening and mind-opening. And I think in times like this, maybe not learning about a specific financial tactic to raise money and all that, you kind of get in the weeds, but I think kind of just thinking bigger. And that's one specific podcast that I find awesome. So Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, I'm actually spacing on the name of it now, but just Google those two people.
Pivot.
What is it?
I think it's called Pivot.
Yeah, Pivot. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's an amazing podcast. That's a great recommendation. Allison, is there anything you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, well, in addition to Bethesda Green, there's two organizations that I would recommend that people look into if it fits a fit. One is Citrine Angels. I'm no longer working with them since I started my new job, but it's not just about writing checks. It's about helping entrepreneurs, and it's a group of about 50 female accredited investors now, and they are there because they want to help support female-founded businesses. And it's a very diverse group as well, which we're very proud of. And the second one is Catalyte. And I don't know if that many people are familiar with them, but any company that's looking for developers or needs to hire developers, which I know is a big need, Catalyte is a national company based in Maryland, and they have figured out a way, an algorithm where they have been able to successfully identify the talents and behaviors that contribute to a successful developer. And they're taking people from all walks of life and training them and placing them into top companies all over the place, all over the country. And they're, on average, when someone comes into their program, they're making $25,000 a year. A few years out of their program, they're making $100,000 a year on average. So, and it's fantastic for the companies too, because if you're going to hire somebody out of that program, then you're practically assured of getting a good addition to your team and doing good for the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Catalyte's a great organization, and Lolita Taub is also an active angel investor. So that's great for you to point out. Thank you. So we're at time right now. I want to say thank you so much to the panelists, Allison, Mark, and Jigger. I've learned a lot today, and you've given me quite a lot to think about. To everyone in the audience, thank you for the great questions. I think some of the panelists may hang around for the rest of the session, so hopefully you are all able to connect. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Patty. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all so much. That was just an awesomely interesting conversation. Mark, the check's in the mail. So keep an eye out for that. The way I look at it is that we all really have our work cut out for us in the coming months and years, don't we? I mean, there's so much to do and so much exciting work ahead. So in a minute, we're just going to take a short 5-minute break before we hear from our entrepreneurs. Thank you all for continuing to stay on with us for the next little bit. Before we jump on break, I would like to remind everyone about 2 of the documents that we have here. One is our attendee event navigation document. So Marisa is going to post that in the chat. This is something that you can refer back to. It has all of the links to the executive summaries from all of our participating entrepreneurs, as well as the links to their pitch videos, and the links to the Zoom rooms where they'll be, which we'll also post here in the chat as we get closer to that time. The other document I would like to inform you about is our attendee survey and comment card. We know that the strength of our community comes from our ability to really support each other. So Marisa has added that comment card in the chat here. We really ask you to consider ways that you can support the entrepreneurs presenting today, perhaps through a warm introduction or with information about a funding opportunity. The strength that we have is each other and bringing us together and sharing what you have. So I invite you to take a moment to complete that either today after you've connected with them here this afternoon, and I'll send it out again after the event. So you'll have a chance to do that too. So now I encourage you to just take a couple of minutes, stretch your legs, refresh your tea. We'll be back here at about, we'll get started about 4:30. So you've got about 5 minutes. Thank you. And I'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. Hi. Welcome back, everyone. I'm just going to give folks another second. I believe I have all of our entrepreneurs here. Just kind of double checking our companies, make sure everyone's lined up, ready to roll. Looks to be good. And welcome. All right, yes, I am able to see all of you. So thank you all for jumping in here. Great. 1 second. All right. I'm going to just double check that everyone can hear me. Thumbs up. You've got me, right? Yes. Rock on. It is great to be here with all of you. In hindsight, I probably should have paused that for that hot minute. So we're going to have to go and like edit out some video action, but you know, that's how it works. Sometimes technology happens. I'm really excited to be here. I really find it so exciting to be around others who share my belief that businesses can be a force for good. And working with all of you, you are just amazing entrepreneurs, and it's such an honor to have had the chance to work with you over the past few months, and for some of you for a couple of years now. So I'd like to kick off the second half of our program here by thanking some of our amazing partners and sponsors who help make the work we do at the Innovation Lab possible. Kudos to the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, Capital One, the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation, MBIA Group, and TEDCO. They are just great in supporting me, helping the program, supporting all of the great entrepreneurs that come through and the partnerships that we have. So it's just wonderful to be part of this growing community. And I would absolutely like to thank all of the wonderful mentors and the advisors and the session facilitators for all that you do. None of the work that we do would be possible without the support of these dedicated professionals who give their time and energy to support our entrepreneurs. And typing in these names, I was so like, it just kept going. And I was like, wow, we have worked with so many amazing people. You guys are so awesome. It's just great. So with that, over the past few months, I think we've begun to witness a substantial shift in the way businesses are perceived as stakeholders in our communities. Restaurants that shuttered as a result of the pandemic have been stepping up to provide meals for the rapidly growing number of individuals and families facing food insecurity. Some manufacturing companies have pivoted to make PPE for our healthcare workers, and many of the artists and coaches and even yoga instructors who suddenly found themselves without a studio in which to perform and teach have jumped online to bring their services to the world. The success of businesses large and small can directly impact the communities in which they thrive. And it's so important that they work to make that impact a positive one. And as much as businesses can impact the community they're in, any entrepreneur will tell you that they rely heavily on the community, their own community, to succeed. So as we've heard, and really just thanks again to the panelists and the speakers earlier, knowing that we have your support is what makes Bethesda Green as strong as it is. And that's where we come in, is trying to kind of, play that role of pulling in just amazing people and helping to direct the energy to support all of you. I'd like to just give a quick overview of our Be Green business program. What we do here at Bethesda Green is twofold. Through our Be Green for B Corp program, we advise existing local businesses through B Corp certification on best practices for sound governance, support for workers, and sustainability. We promote the triple bottom line business philosophy so that one day companies strive not only to be the best, but also to attract the best for workers and improve communities and the environment. Through our Innovation Lab, we identify and attract leaders who are building for-profit business models around innovative and sustainable solutions to tackle environmental and social challenges. So we're here today to celebrate the entrepreneurs of our Innovation Lab, and you'll be hearing from 8 of those leaders in just a few minutes. So today is so exciting. It marks the culmination of 5 months of hard work for the members of our 2020 Spring Accelerator cohort. The founders of Apogee Farms, Grateful Gardeners, Jam Treats, Rendered Inc., and Veg Andes have used the past few months to solidify their business models while responding to the COVID-19 crisis. They've spent time diving into their financial models, diversifying their sales channels, and laying the groundwork for what we can all expect will be rapid growth in the coming months and years. Elysian Holdings is a member of our residency program. This means that they are not only a graduate of the Accelerator program, but they're also a recipient of Bethesda Green's financial award. We also launched a new program this spring to support the later stage companies who see the value of joining Bethesda Green's rapidly growing, sustainability-focused community of entrepreneurs, mentors, investors, service providers, and public and private partners, but who find us past the point at which an accelerator is the best fit. So you'll hear today from Mas Panadas and Chu Algi, two of the members of our Amplifier program. So without further ado, I invite our entrepreneurs to briefly introduce themselves. I'm going to kick off with the accelerator companies. I'm going to try and adjust them here. Let's get them this slide up. And I'm going to kick off with Thomas Langdon from Apogee Farms. So I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me today. So I'm the founder of Apogee Farms, and I've always been infatuated with plants, and particularly plants for medicine. So in 2012, I moved to Colorado to pursue a career in the cannabis industry. I grew medical cannabis and hemp in a variety of controlled environment facilities. And in growing plants professionally, I learned how much plant nutrients directly correlate to a plant's health and what that plant produces. And so it was in those moments I decided that I not only wanted to treat disease, but ultimately I wanted to prevent it. And so that was how I found Apogee Farms.
Great, thank you. And I really can't wait to see all of the work that you're doing in downtown DC and bringing that greenhouse here. Tom Precht, Sarah Dakin, I welcome you. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, Patty, thanks. Hi, I'm Tom Precht, and this is my wife, Sarah Dakin, and we are Grateful Gardeners. You may never have questioned where your flowers that you buy at the grocery store or the florist come from, and it might surprise you to find out that more than 80% of them come from overseas. The flowers aren't regulated for chemical use, and they've typically traveled several days on a plane or on a boat before they get in the hands of a consumer. There has to be a better way. Grateful Gardeners is an organic, local cut flower farm based in Boyds, Maryland. We're in a prime location to provide high quality, long-lasting blooms to florists, floral designers, and grocery stores in the Maryland, Virginia, and DC region. And we have really ambitious goals for the future that we hope we can achieve. And maybe someone can help us with that.
Excellent. And I got to say, man, that flower arrangement in the back, stunning, straight from your garden. Very cool. Beautiful. Meredith, would you like to introduce Jam Treats?
Sure. Thanks everybody for coming. And this is what I'm talking about. My company, Jam Treats, makes nutritionally targeted sweet snacks. Our products are gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and free of refined sugar. They are full of the best ingredients to fuel your body and satisfy your crave. We are committed to solving the search for healthy snacks for busy professionals and families. We built our business through e-commerce and used that channel this spring to raise money for Feed the Fight caregiver treat donations. Right now, I'm looking for distribution and corporate partnerships to broaden our customer base. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Now I'm pleased to welcome Saba Shabaka, the founder and CEO of Rendered Inc.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I am a proud representative of the Maryland community, along with my professor, Professor Walsh, who I'm just so happy that he was able to speak to some of the things that Maryland stands for, and then also the moderator. I feel like Maryland and Terrapin's just really repping really hard right now. So I am the founder and CEO of Rendered Inc., which is a sustainable fashion brand that I started in 2018 as a sophomore at Maryland. I'm on a mission to make my peers and the generation.
Oh no.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still here. Something that we all know, which is the fact that sustainability needs to be a part of the future and innovation. So I do that through vending apparel that I get from thrift stores and consignment shops, and specifically through my newest product line, which is the Rendered Box, which I'm so excited to tell you more about. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last of our Accelerator members, I'm pleased to welcome Sebastian Quiroga and Santiago Diaz from Veg Andes.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. This is Sebastian and my business partner, Santiago.
Hey there.
We are the founders of Veg Andes that showcases hidden treasures from Bolivia through innovative plant-based food options. Each Veg Andes product is part of an extensive chain that involves a large number of actors, nationally and internationally, and has a direct impact on the livelihood of both small business owners in the US and small farmers in Bolivia. We opened for business early this year in DC as we see it is a food incubator given its cultural and social diversity. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, those are our Accelerator members, and you'll be able to hear more from them shortly. I'd like to now invite Tom Mills and Carrie Thompson from Elysian Holdings to introduce their company.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Carrie, and this is Tom. We're Elysian, and we believe that the package matters. We make compostable packaging from industrial hemp. Our farm-to-package model not only makes great packaging, but gives back a crop that helped build America. With our patented technology, which works at both large scale and for our local manufacturing of packaging, we have 5 products in development with our great B2B partners. And we're working with major global companies committed to better packaging. We're raising $200,000 in seed funding with good interest, and we would love to talk with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce our Amplifier members. Margarita Womack is the CEO and founder of Mas Panadas.
Hi, everyone from the Mas Panadas factory. I'm Margarita Womack. I'm the founder of Latin Goodness Foods, and Mas Panadas is our first brand. We are an elevated pocket with a Latin twist, made with all real ingredients, fresh. So what you would find in a homemade meal, but it's something that's convenient, portable, ready in minutes. It's something that can be a snack or a light meal that pairs just as well with a glass of wine as with a juice box. I am right now present in the CPG, so consumer packaged goods, food service, and also private label, and looking to grow to the next level. So looking right now for investors.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, I welcome Nathaniel Jackson from True Algae.
Thank you, Patty. True Algae's unique IP enables us to manufacture high-grade algae in bulk more efficiently than anybody else. We harvest 50% every single day and have 75% gross margins. Our first vertical market is selling the algae as a biofertilizer, which has a global market of over $10 billion. Our next vertical markets of selling the algae include protein extracts for nutraceutical and animal feed markets, which are also multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. In terms of traction, we have built a 36-ton facility in February. We have over $500,000 in sales thus far, and we've raised $2.5 million to date. We're seeking an additional $500,000 for further testing and expansion. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So in just a few minutes, I'm gonna post the links for the Zoom rooms where you'll be able to join and chat with all of these entrepreneurs. I am sorry to say, unfortunately, Margarita will not be able to join us today. She's moderating a panel up at Princeton University, and schedule change, and we've lost her for this, but I have included her email in our attendee event navigator document. So please don't hesitate to reach out to her or myself if you have any questions about that. So you've heard from some of the programs that we currently have, our Accelerator, our Amplifier, and our Residency program. And I'm excited to say that we're letter or follow us on social media to learn more about what we have planned. We've got a summer speaker series that I'm very excited for, as well as a virtual incubator, which we will be piloting this fall to support idea stage companies that align with our mission. So there's, we talked about the ecosystem, and we talked about the need of trying to, connect ideas with resources and helping them grow. And that's really, we're trying to kind of ensure that any entrepreneur who has a vision for a sustainable future knows that we've got their back, and bringing them here to support them. With that, in order to do that, I want to make sure that you have the link here to sign up to Bethesda Green's newsletter list. So I'm sharing that in the chat. And now I would like to invite all of you to your own Zoom rooms. I'm going to go ahead and post the links here. Oops, I've lost Marisa, so I apologize. I'm now holding some double duty activity here. Let's see. Okay, so in the chat room there, you will see the individual Zoom rooms for everybody. So entrepreneurs, I invite you to step out, and I'll just close up here to do this. These rooms for everyone will stay open until about 6 p.m., although there is absolutely no hard stop for this. You are invited to drop in and out to connect with all of the entrepreneurs over the next hour or so. I've attempted to put them in the navigation document so you can see them there. If you would like to learn more about the work that we're doing here at Bethesda Green, let me see. Oh yeah, so the slide here has some of the guidelines for the entrepreneur networking. If you would like to learn more about the work we're doing here at Bethesda Green, Adam, Roberts, and I will stay here in this room until about 6 p.m. So I look forward to answering any questions you have about the work that we're doing in the program. Of course, please don't hesitate to reach out directly if you would like to learn more. My email is patty@bethesdagreen.org. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat as well. Thank you all for your time today, for your ongoing support of our work, and for that of our entrepreneurs. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to speaking with you all soon. Enjoy your conversations. I can't wait to hear more about them.